Hello and welcome to another episode of TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group, and today is another election season episode, which means no news. Maybe that's good news, but also we're going to take the full time to interview candidates who are running in competitive townwide races. Now, you've already seen the three select board candidates running for one seat. We had a special with all of the library candidates, all five, on one episode with longer interviews available online on brooklineinteractive.org. And now we're going to get into the six school committee candidates running for three seats. There are two incumbents, there are four challengers, and it's a real race. So polls are open Tuesday, May 6th from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Polls are also open earlier than that. Use your favorite search engine, figure out the dates, times, locations. They vary by the day, and I'm not recording it and getting it wrong. So you got to look it up yourself. But definitely Election Day, Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then, of course, is the Tommy Vitolo Election Night Results Show that night, where I am going to be live on the air bringing you the results first. Right here from Brookline Interactive. So without further ado, let's get into it today with candidate for school committee, Logan Potere. Logan, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great intro.
You got a baby sleeping behind you?
I wish it'd make my day a little bit more. But hey, we know these Brookline homes, right? It's a condo. You got to use
Yeah,
the
you're
space
making
that
it
you
work.
have. So yeah, we're flexible here.
I love it. Logan, we're going to get into school committee race in just a minute. But first, some of my viewers have not met you yet. So what have you been doing your whole life?
Yeah, no, great question. So yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. My name is Logan Potere. Obviously, I'm running for school committee. I'm a father of three. I have a first grader and two boys in Beep. We moved here in 2022 to follow my wife's career. One good thing that came out of COVID was work from home. So we moved from Ohio, and I'm still flexible here in Boston. We chose Brookline, namely because of the schools, and I know we'll get into it here in a little bit, but obviously very committed and dedicated to the performance of our schools and the reason why we're here in Boston. From a personal perspective, I've been a business professional for over 15 years in various roles, sales, supply chain, and finance, which I think can lend itself really well to the current issues we face in our schools and on our school committees. So I appreciate the intro and looking forward to talking to you, Tommy, and the questions we have today.
So look, school committee will get you neither rich nor famous. Um, it's a hard job. So why do it? Why run for school committee?
Yeah, so when I moved here from Ohio, I think the first thing that struck me about Brookline, outside of just being living close to Boston and having everything that an urban/suburban environment gives you, was just how different our town government was. I come from a place that had a mayor, has a city council, a school board, all elected officials, and I was vastly fascinated by town meeting, right? The advisory board, select board, school committee, all the subcommittees. And, I think that really got my interest when the Pierce vote came up and all the discussion that went along with that. Fast forward to the 11 conversation on the school committee and with the administration last summer around potentially getting rid of some of our honors classes and AP classes because of some of the disequity, right, with who is getting nominated for those as rising eighth graders, and seeing some of the cuts that then happened with the school budget last year, specifically to the early language program. I think all of those things combined was getting my I don't know, advocacy bug really, really turning. Fast forward to a couple months ago when the initial budget was proposed and we had over $8 million gap to the requested spend versus what the proposed budget should be, and then saw where the cuts were, mostly to K through 8 positions, K through 8 programmings, all student facing, frankly. that frankly got me really concerned. And my wife is, very much supportive of me. She's like, you know what? Since we've moved to Brookline, you've been so interested in the way we govern, and have had a lot of questions about the ways that we make decisions as a town. If you're going to give yourself to anything, why don't you give your energy to something that actually impacts your kids, which is school committee? And so, a lot of friends of ours who are in very similar positions were like, hey, if you're interested in running, you'd be a great voice, a great advocate for us, who are in similar situations, right? Young kids, highly concerned about some of the decisions that are being made because of how much longer we have, in the schools. Why don't you do it? And so I think talking to some, near and dear friends, having the support of my wife, she's like, jump in and do it. And I think that culminative experience, over the last, call it 2 years, is really what made me do it.
So you brought up the budget gap, and I want to get into it. Of course, the viewers know this is a pre-recorded show, so I don't want to get into the kind of minute by minute today's update. Viewers won't see it the day we're filming, but it was initially introduced as an $8 million budget gap, not a deficit, a budget gap. The difference between what the superintendent imagined would be make for a great budget and the amount of money that the school committee expected to have. And you said that got you sort of revved up. Tell us about your observations as a school parent of young children, right? Relatively new to the district, and you're like, what's going on? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, like I said in my intro, why we chose Brookline was because of the schools. Um, there's a lot of great neighborhoods within and around Boston. Brookline stood out because of the schools. And our experience thus far has been unbelievable. Our my kindergarten experience, my first grade's current experience, my children who are in B, they've been outstanding. And I can tell you personally, as well as others of my peer group, were extremely uh, angered last year when they cut that early language program, because that to me was a key differentiator, if you will, to have my first grader potentially be learning Mandarin or Spanish or Russian, right? The list goes on. Um, so to have that experience last year, and then fast forward to where we were in January, to see the gap. And again, as a business professional who builds budgets and is held accountable to a budget every single year, I think the initial look that I did was, okay, we have a gap. Why do we have a gap? The biggest part of that gap, frankly, was related to people costs. And that really got me questioning, why are we even in this situation? By my math, and I'm sure the percentages are a little different, but roughly 75% of the school budget is tied up with contracts, teachers, janitorial, food service. Those contracts are 5 years in length, all have a defined escalation based on COLA, or the inflation rather, in years of service. So these increases should not be a surprise to the administration. They should not be a surprise to the committee. And frankly, it should not be a surprise to the general public, because we should have a budget projected spend for the life of those contracts. And to have a surprise last year that I know angered a lot of parents, that then have a surprise this year that's even larger and went even further with some of the proposed cuts, I think was a big problem and a big miss, because we were proposing to close the gap with student facing positions, right? That were math specialists, learning curriculum advisors, right? Paraprofessionals in first grade, the conservatory program, middle school sports, right? Things that have a direct impact on our children. And when I connected back to a discussion last year on the leveling, right, one of the key arguments from the administration was that we have rising eighth graders that aren't ready for the rigors of high school, right? Aren't ready to have some of these honors classes available to them. Yet now, when we're in a budget crisis again, we're making cuts to K through 8 curriculum, and that to me just doesn't connect with what the goals are of our administration and frankly what I think we as parents want for our kids, which is a world-class education.
So you talked about some of the things you weren't happy about proposing. Where do you think there is room to tighten it up a bit? Right? If you
Yeah,
if you
great.
had to find $8 million from, again, what the not what we currently had, but what the superintendent proposed. So some of the proposals you can just sort of say, well, we're not going to do that proposal, right? But there's a gap. Where can we find the money?
Yeah, great question. So again, if you look at the current spend of the administration, you obviously have costs that you can't necessarily change, which is the money I talked about for our teachers, paras, right, custodial, food service, etc. I think that's all spend that is student facing, is contractual, needs to be protected. When you look at the other spend, a big portion of that, upwards of $12 million, is in the central office, right? So the office of the superintendent. And I think, again, what angered parents, my peers, and what had a lot of people asking questions is that one, no proposed cuts were in that office. Two, that spend is up $3.5 million in just 2 years, and is up much more if you go pre-pandemic. And I think that is a key area for us to look. And reasons being are twofold. One, you have K through 8 schools that in my mind all have their own personalities, and that's great, right? My school district is Runkle. That's a little bit different than Driscoll, which is a little bit different than Baker, Pierce, etc. That's great, right? But connecting this back to my business experience, if you have a large central office, that means a lot of standardization, a lot of same programs, right, and same performance. And when you look at these K through 8 schools, they all have their, again, I said their own personality, but they also all have their own educational performance. And sure, some of that's maybe because of population and the students they serve, but they also have different philosophies on homework, as an example, right? I know schools, mine doesn't give homework. I know some that are literally around the block that do. And so that makes me question, so what is our central administration office doing if all of our K through 8 schools can potentially have their own programs or philosophies on how they teach? Frankly, you also look at some of the other programs around diversity and equity and inclusion that we've spent a lot of money on from a central administration perspective, but it was brought up a couple of weeks ago in a meeting that the data doesn't support that that's actually even made a difference. And so I think you have to look at that office and question, we've made a large investment there. Has that had the impact that was planned? And I think that is a hard question for us to answer right now. And then the second part of that is when you have a big budget gap, you can't just look outward, right? You're the school administration. You have to look at yourself and question, okay, my budget has grown by, again, $3.5 million over 2 years, much more if you look further. Am I supporting my core mission, which the first two of the five goals are all about joining the classroom and investing in the classroom and in education? And if we're not questioning whether the central office is, really digging in there and making an impact on those goals, then we should question what it is that we're doing.
So slightly different direction. You moved here recently. You said you moved here for the schools. One way to know the schools are great is ask a real estate agent. They'll tell you, right? But I suspect, as a finance guy, as a business guy, you probably used some metrics, right? My guess is one of them was test scores, right? So recently, state law, due to a ballot initiative, just removed passing a standardized test as a requirement for graduating high school. And so testing is going to be part of an ongoing conversation in the school committee in the years ahead. What are your thoughts on the role of standardized testing in our Brookline public schools? What should they be? What are we getting it right? What are the changes? give us some sense on where you're going to land on questions around standardized testing.
Yeah, I think I'll tell you, I voted no on getting rid of the standardized test. And the reason being is I'm a firm believer that we need data to understand if our methods of teaching are landing with our students. And I don't know how you do that without some sort of test, whether that's state administered, school district administered. But we as students, we as parents, right, need to be able to understand how our, frankly, again, our kids and our student population are progressing. And so I think that was a miss from the state, frankly. And again, I don't know if this is an old school thinking or thought, but I grew up, I had standardized tests. I can remember getting rid of those in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And frankly, if our students in high school want to go on to college, the ACT and SATs are still a part of that entrance requirement, right? And that's a standardized test. And I know there's been a lot of discussion there. Some schools dropped it during the pandemic. They're coming back. I don't think you get away from standardized testing. And so I think this is something that has to be part of our curriculum, in the way that we measure our progress, not only from the student body, but I also think it provides data back to us as the administration, us as teachers, that is our methods working, right? Are we able to give our students the information that they need to withhold, that they can exceed on and understand? And if not, then how do we change our methods to make sure we are continuously improving our students' performance?
You and I are about the same age, which means our educational experience growing up is probably pretty similar. I'm from Connecticut. I think you're from Ohio, or at least you moved here from Ohio, but
Yep.
school. There's a lot more technology in the classrooms, in the backpacks, in the pockets, and at a much younger age, right? You said I think you've got a first grader.
First grade is my oldest, yes.
So probably not a laptop yet, but coming soon, right? What do you think about all of this technology in education? Are we getting it right?
Yeah, no, I'm going to hit on something you said. School, right? And again, for at the risk of sounding old, I think you have to be able to use technology, right? It is everywhere we are. It's in our pockets. It's in our cars. It's in the restaurants now with how we order. Computers are prevalent everywhere, and you want your children comfortable with that. However, much like some of the discussion is around social media, right? I think you've had Texas and Florida now ban access to it until you're 15. What I would liken technology overall to, at least in the schools, is a great experiment that we've had, right? I go back, I didn't have a cell phone in high school. I didn't have a computer. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a freshman in college. And some of my most memorable teachers in high school were I would liken to an old prep school or old college, where it was a lot of discussion, a lot of essays that weren't necessarily trying to measure on if you got the exact date right, but we're trying to understand if you could have a thought and a method in try and understand all the events that might have been going around that specific prompt, right? I'm thinking about a history, like what was going through FDR about the entrance in the World War II and maybe why he delayed, right? There's a lot of events, and it wasn't about keying in on one. It was trying to understand the entire emotion and atmosphere around a discussion. Those are classes that land with me still to this day. I can remember those classes and that teacher. To think about my student getting a Chromebook in third grade, and I've talked to parents. I mean, there's access to games, and oh, we have indoor recess. What did you do? I played on my computer. I don't know if that's bringing the value of what we as parents want, or maybe what teachers want. I think the depth of education is more shallow when we rely on computers and other technology. And again, go back to what you said and what I said: school, math is math, English is English, history is history. I think there's a depth of knowledge and conversation that a blackboard and books, frankly, can help, right? And tying this back to, again, motivations of others with finance, we spend a lot of money on technology every year in Brookline schools. And I think you look at some of our results with MCAS and others, there's not been any movement in there. Our kids are not scoring better than their predecessors in prior generations. I'm not saying that's because of technology, but I think it begs the question, are we achieving what we want in the classroom with the methods we have?
Let's talk about if you win. Right, you're running to win, 6 candidates, 3 positions. School committee, of course, has subcommittees, and you can't be on all of them. Even if you had the time and you don't, you couldn't, right? And so my question is, are there particular subcommittees or interests as a school committee member? Where are you going to lean in? Where are you going to say, I'm here to, really roll up my sleeves and get into it? Not enough time to do that for everything. You got to pick and choose. Where are you going to pick and choose?
Yes. So I think my experience, again, as a business professional, really allows myself to hit the ground running on the finance subcommittee. I would not shy away from that committee, and I think I can bring value. Again, I've built billion-dollar budgets that I've been held accountable to. I've constantly had to find budget and solve for budget gaps. Right? I just had an $8 million budget gap, not coincidentally, this year that we've solved for, right? And so I'm able to lead in that, and I think bring a lot of value there. Beyond that, my secondary interest and where I'd love to jump in is kind of related to the last question around our curriculum and how we teach, right? And diving in with teachers and students and administrators to really understand, one, what are our goals as a administration that encompasses not only, their experience as educators, but also bringing a parent's voice to, hey, this is what I would like for my students, my kids, and be an advocate for parents. Um, but also use that as an opportunity for myself to learn, right? I'm never going to pretend I'm the smartest person in the room. Frankly, I love being the dumbest person in the room because I love absorbing knowledge from others. But I think I'm able to bring a parent's perspective on what it is that we want for our children to a, education and curriculum subcommittee, right? I think if you talk to any parent, one of the things I would hope they say is, I want better for my child than I had, right? And to me, school and the education they get is one of those things. And again, I think why a lot of people want to be in Brookline schools. And I want to be able to hold the administration accountable to that, but also help them down that path of making sure we have a world-class education here in Brookline.
So the polls are open Tuesday, May 6th. There's some time between now and then, campaign season. How's the campaign going for you? How are you finding being a candidate?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, right? I've enjoyed being able to talk to fellow candidates and frankly, the camaraderie that's been there, at least on the school committee. I think we're all kind of motivated for the same reasons, which is fantastic. There's a great advocacy there. I've enjoyed getting out and talking to parents, talking to teachers, talking to administrators from BEEP, right, and kind of getting their perspective of what's going on. I've been at the school committee meetings, and again, the advocacy that I'm seeing from, again, parents, union groups, right, food service employees, math specialists that are sitting there. You can tell the support the town has for the schools. And again, I think we're in a very polarizing time because of the budget gaps. But if anything, I would say, like, the administration, just look at the advocacy that's coming from all corners to see how big of an impact you have on people, not only from their livelihood, but the impact you have on their kids. So it's been fantastic from that perspective. And it's given me a lot of pride to be from Brookline because you're seeing everybody come out. And I'm going to be participating in a lot of events. We got the North Brookline event tomorrow. I don't know when this is going to air, but here in April, right, I'm going to be at a few events coming up this weekend and next week that are just going to give me another opportunity to get out and share my view and really get feedback. again, I said I don't ever pretend to be the smartest person in the room. I'm someone who can loves to listen, right? I love to build consensus, and I like to understand how I can help and be an advocate. Um, and I think getting out and talking to the public is helping me do that.
We've just got a minute or two left. Answer the question I should have asked. What am I missing? What else do you feel like you want to tell people about? You got another minute or two. You may as well use it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think I want to leave with this, right? If I'm elected, I want to know what people feel I'm going to support and what I'm about. I think first, yeah, I hope you got through here. I'm going to be a champion for the budget. I'm going to help drive transparency, drive communication, and frankly, build trust between the administration and the school committee so that we can get out ahead of these surprises. The annual surprises where you ask for an override, you're going to ruin the public's trust and the willingness for them to work. And again, I think you've seen the public is behind our schools and we want to believe and support them. But when you lose trust in the administration, that hurts. I'm going to be a no vote for any cut to the athletics and arts. I'm a big believer that those are the things that make our kids most happy or give them at least an avenue for their happiness in school. And schools that get rid of those programs are sad places. I have fond memories of playing sports in school. I remember learning how to play the stand up bass third through fifth grade. That's not an instrument I would have ever asked my mom to take me to get lessons for, right? That would have been a guitar. But I played the stand up bass in our orchestra for 2 years, and it was all because of the music program my school had. I'm
Was
never
it
gonna.
because you were the only one tall enough to play it?
That might have been the reason why. Maybe I liked it because it was the biggest instrument. I don't know, but again, a fond memory, right, of something that I got to do as a child that I would have never got to experience had I not gone to school. And then I'm going to be a major proponent for Brookline having a world class education, right? Massachusetts leads the nation in public schools. Brookline should be the school that leads the nation as the top public school in the country. And I think you have the public support, you have the resources. Again, where we are in Boston, the universities and just the resources we have from an academic perspective is something to be so proud of. How can we harness that here in Brookline? And so those three things are really core to me, and I want you to know that's what I'm going to support if elected.
Folks, we're out of time. Uh, this is TV on TV with State Representative Tommy Vitolo right here on Brookline Interactive Group. The election Tuesday, May 6th, competitive races for select board, school committee, library trustee, and most town meeting precincts as well. We've had a great half hour with Logan Potere, candidate for school committee. Keep watching, keep learning about the elections, and keep on voting. Your next chance, Tuesday, May 6th. We'll see you next time.